Thank you. Sir Keir Starmer's here. Your thoughts after yesterday?
Well, we only had part of the story from Sue Gray, obviously, but it was a pretty damning part of the story. We know that of the 12 parties or gatherings that she was investigating, of the 16 she was investigating, 12 of them are going to the police for investigation because the police have assessed that they're serious enough and flagrant enough to put on one side the usual rule that they won't look at things more than 12 months ago. So it's as damning as it could be. And, you know, we're all paying the price for the chaos and incompetence and worse of the Prime Minister and his behaviour.
And now we need to wait for the police report.
We've got to wait for the police to investigate. So we've got a Prime Minister who I think broke the rules, I think then lied about breaking the rules, who then instigated the Sue Gray report and has now brought a criminal investigation upon himself. And that is about as damning as it can get for a British Prime Minister of whatever political party. Meanwhile, people are seeing their energy bills go up and nothing is being done about it. And so, you know, there was a real range of emotions yesterday in the House because I think the one thing that the last 6-7 weeks of allegations about the Prime Minister's behaviour has done is forced everybody to relive moments in their own lives in the last 2 years, those sort of dark moments, and people have felt angry, they felt grief, and they felt guilt. And I've had so many people say to me, Keir, I feel guilty because I followed the rules, I didn't do what I wanted to do in my heart, go and look after my dad, clean up, look after an elderly relative, and I feel guilty that I didn't do it because I was obeying the rules, and people feel that they've been taken for mugs. There's now a further emotion, which is frustration, which is my energy bills are going up and the government's doing absolutely nothing about it. Now, we, the Labour Party, have said we'll cut those energy bills. We've set out how we would fund that with a windfall tax on oil and gas. We want the government to get on with it. We've got a motion this afternoon in Parliament to be voted on. But the Prime Minister is spending all of his time saving his own skin instead of running the country.
Isn't he a lawyer? I mean, given that you are a lawyer, he certainly isn't. Isn't he innocent until proven guilty?
Well, of course he is, but...
Why are we judging him?
We got to an absurd situation yesterday where he was asked a very simple question. Were you at the party in your own flat on the 30th of November 2020? And he says, I can't answer that because there's a police investigation. That is nonsense.
But wouldn't that prejudice the police investigation?
How does it prejudice the police investigation for him to admit that he was at a party in his own flat? I'm sorry, that is bordering on the ridiculous.
Because he could have gone to the flat, he lives there, he could be in one of the bedrooms, there could be something going on elsewhere and he wouldn't even know about it. You know, a bit like when he went into the garden, he didn't know that that was a gathering, and when he knew, then he left, and he didn't know, he was totally ambushed by the cake, he didn't know that that was going to be a birthday
Yeah,
party.
Apparently he went into the garden and there were bottles of wine and trellises of sandwiches and lots of people drinking, and he didn't realise it was a party until he was 25.
He was trying to run the country at the time. We were in the middle of a pandemic.
Do you know, one of the things that has angered people most over the last few weeks is, one, they know he broke the rules. Two, they think he's insulting their intelligence with these ridiculous defences. And he's also forcing all of his front bench, his ministers out, onto your programmes and others, to make complete fools of themselves, peddling these absurd defences.
Isn't that up to them?
Well, it is up to them, but meanwhile, we've got an energy bill crisis which isn't being addressed. And that is why we've had a proposal on the table to reduce energy bills for several weeks now, and the government is doing absolutely nothing about it. And whilst they're trying to save his skin, he was supposed to have a meeting with the Chancellor last week about energy bills. It got cancelled because he needed to spend his time with his own backbenchers saving his own job. Families, therefore, are not getting a reduction on their energy bill. And Labour has stepped up to say, we've got a plan, we've got a costed plan, we want to move it forward. Whilst you are mired in this misbehaviour, we are putting the case for a new Britain built on security, prosperity and respect, and we will continue to make that case. And I invite all Tory MPs this afternoon, if they really want to move this on and focus on energy bills, vote with us this afternoon to reduce the bills for millions of families across the country.
Yeah, well, as you know, if I had a Conservative MP sitting there, they'd be telling me about the vaccine rollout, they'd be telling me about how well the economy is doing, they'd be telling me about how well the furlough scheme went. So, let's put that to one side, if we may, and talk about specifically about what people are concerned about, which is the Sue Gray report, and whether that is enough for the Prime Minister to step down. The Prime Minister says, no, it's not. It does look as though his backbenchers are agreeing with him. When you looked over at them yesterday in the House of Commons, how did you feel?
I looked at their face. The one thing, there aren't many advantages of being the dispatch box, but as you step forward to the dispatch box, all the sort of friendly faces are behind you, and you've got a wall of the government faces. Their faces were stony. They were not with him. They know how serious this is. And I think that they're ashamed of the Prime Minister. And you can see very well when they're with him and when they're not with him. And you heard some of what those on his own side said yesterday about his behaviour. They know that, successive Prime Ministers, whether they're, Conservative, whether they're Labour, have honoured the office. They've recognised that to lead this country is an honour. It's not a birthright. And I think they're ashamed of this Prime Minister.
OK, this was the scene yesterday. He did have some support. Some of them stood up to speak in his support, and there was a lot of nodding from the front bench, as you said. I mean, what would you say to the front bench of the government this morning?
They know that this Prime Minister cannot be removed unless they act. I think he's unfit for office, and I think they should act and remove this Prime Minister who is not fit for his responsibilities. And they've got a choice. They either do that or they carry on debasing themselves and going out into the studios, peddling his absurd defences. They have to go out and make the argument that their Prime Minister didn't realise he was at a party with bottles and sandwiches for half an hour. They have to come and sit on your show and make that argument. They know it's not true. They know it's not credible. I think they are debasing themselves and debasing their office. They are also not getting on with the job because they're spending the whole of their time defending a Prime Minister who is indefensible. OK, you talked about wine and sandwiches. We need to deal with this photograph as well of you with beer and butties back in Durham. I think it was April of 2020. If you were Sue Gray, would you want to investigate that? I've explained this photograph, which actually came out a couple of days after it was taken, so many times. We were in a constituency office working. It was a few days before the local elections, and we had nothing to eat. A takeaway came and we ate. We stopped to eat the takeaway and then we went back to work. That is the long and the short of it. There is no breach of the rules. There was no party. There's nothing to investigate. And you'd be happy for the police to look into that in more detail? Well, look, the police are now looking at 12 of the 16 allegations, having assessed them to be serious. There is no breach of the rule there. No, so you would be happy for the police to look into it? Absolutely nothing to hide at all. I've explained it so many times. Even the Prime Minister has now backed off attacking me. So you would be happy for the police to look into it? No problem. Was no breach of the rules. OK. I didn't understand what the Prime Minister was talking about yesterday when he brought up Jimmy Savile. What's all that about? It is a ridiculous slur peddled by right-wing trolls. And the disgust, and this is where I saw the faces of the Conservative MPs, the disgust on their faces that their Prime Minister was debasing himself by sinking so low in the chamber was clear. They knew that he was going so low with that slur, with that lie. He'd been advised not to do it because it's obviously not true, but he does it because he doesn't understand what honesty and integrity means. When I was Director of Public Prosecutions, I was superintended by the Attorney General, a Conservative Attorney General. So it is as ridiculous as it gets. And I'm glad that those Tories MPs were disgusted, and many of them expressed that to me, disgusted at their Prime Minister for debasing himself in the House of Commons, instead of acting with the contrition and the integrity that he should have shown yesterday. He does what he always does, which is to try to drag everybody into the gutter with him. And the one thing we know about this Prime Minister is everybody who's ever come into contact with him always gets damaged in the process. I've been working in politics for a very long time. First election I ever covered was 1979 when Margaret Thatcher won. And I am used to politicians not liking each other particularly, but they always use a language of diplomacy. You've decided to put that away now. I'm not one of these politicians that is so tribal that I won't reach out and form partnerships, even friendships with Conservative MPs. Many of them I know, I like and I get along with, and I think that is my reputation in Parliament. But when I see a Prime Minister lacking the basic honesty and integrity for the job of Prime Minister, then I'm sorry, that's a step too far for me, whatever the colour, whatever the party of that Prime Minister.
And does it make you think, you know, I don't want to be involved in politics anymore? If we've got this guy in charge, it's not for me.
No, it makes me even more determined that we must make sure this Prime Minister is gone. He's debasing the office of Prime Minister. He's just got to go.
OK. Do you think that he should face face-to-face inquiries from the police?
Oh, well, I mean, it's up to the police now how they conduct their investigations. And they may well need to interview him. That's a matter for them, and I don't think I should be telling them how to do their job in that respect.
OK, how long do you think it's going to take?
I hope not long. It's a very simple offence. How many people were there? Was there a reasonable excuse? So it's
a lot of evidence, though.
There's 500 pages and 300 photographs.
A lot of photographs for a work event, but there we are.
There are a lot of photographs, and often a picture tells 1,000 words, so paints 1,000 words. So, you know, we'll see what they say.
OK. Let me just ask you before you go. It was a very challenging time for a lot of people, the pandemic. For you in particular, I mean, you found it very difficult as far as the family was concerned, didn't you?
I did, or we did. You know, my wife lost her mum just before the pandemic, and it was a very, very difficult time for her. And we as a family had our struggles, and she had her struggles. I prefer not to go into them in great detail because I always try to protect the privacy of my family. But one of the reasons that I said yesterday that every family was marked by this is because we as a family were marked by it, what we didn't do because we followed the rules, and the grief that that brought and the guilt that that brought upon us.
And do you regret abiding by the rules now, given what you know was potentially happening at Downing Street?
I think millions of people feel that they were mugs. People tossed and turned at night thinking, I should have done that for my family member. I should have gone in and cleaned up. I should have hugged. I should have done something in the situation. But they didn't, because they were following the rules. And certainly there are elements of that in my own family. I think every family had elements of that. And now they do look back and feel, you know, that they were mugs.
Do you feel you were a mug?
No, they shouldn't. They should feel pride. Pride that what they did probably saved the lives of people they will never meet. And that is the real story of our country through this pandemic. And the great tragedy now is it's stained by this Prime Minister and by his behaviour.
Sir Keir, I must let you go. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.